The wedding invitation arrived on a Thursday morning, cream-colored cardstock with his own name embossed in gold lettering, and Quinn Harrington stared at it like it might burst into flames if he looked away. He was marrying a woman he had never met, and his grandmother had orchestrated the entire thing from her hospital bed with the precision of a four-star general. Quinn ran his hand through his dark hair and leaned back in his leather chair, the sprawling Chicago skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office. Harrington Global Solutions was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the Midwest, and at 32, Quinn had taken the helm after his father's retirement 3 years ago. He had built empires, negotiated billion-dollar mergers, and revolutionized drug distribution networks across 3 continents. But apparently, he could not convince his dying grandmother that he was perfectly capable of finding his own wife. "You work too much," she had told him 2 months ago, her frail hand gripping his with surprising strength. "I want to see you settled before I go, Quinn. I want to know someone will take care of you. I can take care of myself, Gran. That is not the same thing, and you know it." Her eyes, still sharp despite her illness, had fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel 12 years old again. "I have found someone perfect for you. Audrey Graham. Her grandfather and I have been friends for 60 years. She is a good girl, Quinn. Smart, kind, beautiful. Give her a chance. Give me this piece." And because Quinn loved his grandmother more than he loved his own stubborn pride, because she had raised him after his mother died and had believed in him when no one else did, he had said yes. He had agreed to marry a complete stranger to give a dying woman peace of mind. Now, sitting in his office with the invitation mocking him from his desk, Quinn wondered if this was what insanity felt like. His assistant, Margaret, knocked and entered without waiting for permission. She had been with him since he took over the company and treated him like the grandson she never had. "Your grandmother called. She wants you to have dinner with Audrey tonight, 7 o'clock at Marcello's." Quinn closed his eyes. "Margaret, this is insane. Life is insane, Mr. Harrington. Love is insane. Sometimes we just have to trust the people who love us." She set a file on his desk. "Also, the Patterson contract needs your signature by end of day. This is not love. This is an arrangement." Margaret smiled, a knowing look crossing her weathered face. "Sometimes the best things start as arrangements. My parents had an arranged marriage. They were married for 53 years. After she left, Quinn picked up his phone and looked at the single photo his grandmother had sent him. Audrey Graham sat on a park bench, her blonde hair catching the sunlight, a book open in her lap. She was not looking at the camera, and something about the candidness of the shot made her seem more real, more human. She was beautiful, yes, but it was an understated beauty, natural and unforced. He could see intelligence in the slight furrow of her brow as she read, and there was something peaceful about the way she held herself. He saved the photo and tried not to think about how his heart had done something strange when he first saw it. Audrey Graham stood in front of her closet at 6:15 and tried to remember how to breathe. She was meeting her future husband for the first time in 45 minutes, and every dress she owned suddenly looked either too formal, too casual, too desperate, or too indifferent. She finally settled on a simple navy dress that her best friend Natalie insisted made her look sophisticated, and tried to ignore the way her hands shook as she applied mascara. This was not how she had imagined her life going. At 28, Audrey had a doctorate in molecular biology, a promising research position at Northwestern University, and absolutely no interest in marriage. She had spent her 20s in laboratories and libraries, chasing answers to questions most people did not even know to ask. Romance had always seemed like something that happened to other people, something she would get around to eventually, maybe, if she ever stopped being so fascinated by cellular regeneration and gene therapy. Then her grandfather had gotten sick. The same week she learned his cancer had returned, he had sat her down in his study and told her about his oldest friend, Elizabeth Harrington, who was also dying. He told her about a promise they had made decades ago, about 2 grandchildren who might be perfect for each other, about legacies and families, and the things that mattered at the end of a life. "I know this is not what you planned, Audrey," he had said, his voice rough with emotion. "But sometimes the best things are not planned. Elizabeth's grandson is a good man, successful, honorable, kind, and you deserve someone who will appreciate that brilliant mind of yours. Just meet him. Just give it a chance. If it does not work, no one will force you. But I think you might surprise yourself." Audrey had looked at the hope in her grandfather's eyes and felt her carefully constructed life shift beneath her feet. She had built walls around her heart with logic and science, convinced herself that love was just neurochemicals and evolutionary biology. But seeing her grandfather's plea, understanding that this might be one of his last wishes, those walls had crumbled like paper, so she had said yes. Yes to meeting a stranger. Yes to a marriage that made no logical sense. Yes, because sometimes love for family trumped self-preservation. Now, applying lipstick with trembling fingers, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Marcello's was the kind of restaurant where CEOs proposed mergers and politicians made deals that changed cities. Quinn arrived 10 minutes early and sat at the corner table his assistant had reserved, nursing a scotch and trying to look like a man who went on blind dates with his future wife all the time. The maitre d' had recognized him immediately, of course. Quinn's face had been in Chicago Business Journal 3 times in the past year alone. He hated the attention, the constant awareness that people were watching, judging, calculating what they could gain from knowing him. He saw her the moment she entered. Audrey Graham walked into the restaurant like she was bracing for impact, her shoulders straight, her chin up, but her eyes betraying nervousness. She was more beautiful in person than in the photo, and Quinn found himself standing before he realized he had moved. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and something electric passed between them, something that made his carefully prepared greeting die in his throat. She walked to him, and he noticed she was tall, nearly reaching his shoulder even in modest heels. Up close, her eyes were gray-green, the color of the ocean before a storm, and they studied him with an intensity that suggested she was cataloging every detail. "Quinn Harrington." Her voice was softer than he expected, with a slight rasp that made his name sound intimate. "Audrey Graham." He extended his hand, and when she took it, the touch sent unexpected warmth up his arm. "It is good to finally meet you." "Is it?" The question was not hostile, just honest, and it startled a laugh out of him. "I do not know yet. Ask me again in an hour." Something shifted in her expression, the nervousness giving way to a small smile. "Fair enough." They sat, and for a moment silence stretched between them, loaded with the weight of what they were supposed to become to each other. Quinn took a sip of his scotch and decided honesty was the only approach that made sense. "This is completely insane," he said. Audrey's smile widened, becoming genuine. "Clinically insane. I have been trying to rationalize it for 2 months, and I still cannot make it make sense. My grandmother is dying, and I would do anything for her, including marrying a stranger. My grandfather has cancer, and I love him more than logic." Audrey picked up the menu, but he could tell she was not really reading it. "So here we are. 2 rational adults entering into an irrational arrangement because we love 2 manipulative old people who think they know what is best for us." Quinn laughed again, a real laugh that surprised him. "When you put it that way, it sounds almost romantic. Does it?" Audrey looked at him over the menu, and he saw intelligence and humor and something else he could not quite name. I was thinking it sounded more like the setup for a tragedy. Comedy or tragedy, I guess we will find out which. They ordered, and the conversation flowed easier than Quinn had imagined possible. Audrey told him about her research, and he found himself genuinely fascinated by her explanation of targeted gene therapy for degenerative diseases. She talked about science the way he talked about business, with passion and precision, and he realized she was not just intelligent but brilliant, her mind working in ways that challenged him to keep up. "What about you?" she asked as their entrees arrived. "What is it like running a pharmaceutical empire?" "Pharmaceutical company," he corrected. "Empire sounds so supervillain. If the megalomaniacal shoe fits," he grinned. "Harrington Global is not an empire, it is a legacy. My great-grandfather started it with a single drugstore in 1947. My grandfather expanded it to manufacturing. My father took it international. I am just trying not to screw up what they built." "Just," Audrey raised an eyebrow. "I read about the Meridian acquisition last year. That was not just maintenance. That was brilliant." Quinn felt something warm bloom in his chest. Most people either did not understand his work or assumed he had gotten where he was through nepotism and luck. Hearing genuine appreciation in Audrey's voice felt different, felt real. "You read business journals." "I read everything. It is a problem." She took a sip of wine. "My apartment is basically a library with a bed and a kitchen." "That does not sound like a problem. That sounds like heaven." Her eyes softened, and Quinn felt the moment shift into something more intimate. They were not strangers anymore, not exactly. They were two people discovering they might actually like each other, and the possibility terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. "Can I ask you something?" Audrey set down her fork and looked at him directly. "Why did you really say yes to this?" "I understand loving your grandmother, but this is your life, your marriage. Why would you let someone else choose?" Quinn considered the question, appreciated that she asked it. "Honestly, because I am terrible at relationships. I work 80-hour weeks. I travel constantly. I have had 3 serious girlfriends in my life, and all 3 ended the same way, with them telling me I am married to my work. Maybe I am. Maybe Gran knew I would never make time to find someone on my own, so she decided to make time for me. That is depressingly pragmatic," says the woman who explained love as neurochemicals earlier. Audrey laughed, and the sound made something in Quinn's chest tighten. "Touché. I suppose I said yes for similar reasons. My work is my life. I have spent the past decade in laboratories and lecture halls. I have published 17 papers, but I have never had a relationship last longer than 4 months. My grandfather probably figured if he did not intervene, I would end up alone with my research and my cats." "You have cats?" "Not yet, but it feels inevitable." They talked through dessert and coffee, and Quinn realized 2 hours had passed without him checking his phone once, which might have been a personal record. Audrey made him laugh with stories about academic politics and laboratory disasters. He told her about the time he accidentally approved the wrong formula for a cough syrup and turned 3,000 bottles of medicine bright purple. They discovered they both loved old movies, both hated modern art, and both had a weakness for terrible puns that made them groan even as they laughed. When the check came, Quinn paid over Audrey's protests, and they walked outside into the cool Chicago evening. The city lights reflected off the buildings around them, and Quinn found himself not wanting the night to end. "So," Audrey said, wrapping her arms around herself against the breeze. "What do we do now?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, we just had dinner. We did not hate each other, but we are supposed to get married in 3 months. How does this work?" Quinn stepped closer and he saw her breath catch slightly. We date. We get to know each other. We see if this arrangement has any chance of becoming something real. And if it does not, then we call it off. I will not force you into anything, Audrey. Whatever our grandparents want, this is still our choice. She studied his face, and he wondered what she saw there. You mean that? I do. Okay, she nodded, and he saw the tension leave her shoulders. Okay, we date, we try, and we see what happens. Quinn pulled out his phone. Give me your number, I will call you tomorrow. They exchanged contact information, and when a cab pulled up for Audrey, Quinn surprised himself by taking her hand. Thank you for tonight, for giving this a chance. Thank you for not being a nightmare. She squeezed his hand, and the touch felt significant. I will talk to you tomorrow, Quinn. He watched her cab disappear into traffic and realized he was smiling like an idiot. Margaret was right. Sometimes the best things started as arrangements. He just had not expected to feel this way after one dinner, this sense of possibility opening up inside him like dawn. The next morning, Quinn called Audrey at 9. She answered on the third ring, her voice still rough with sleep, and he felt guilty for waking her even as he felt pleased that he had an excuse to hear her voice. Did I wake you? Yes, but it is fine. I should have been up an hour ago. He heard rustling, imagined her sitting up in bed, and tried not to let his mind wander down that path. What is up? I have meetings all day, but I am free tomorrow afternoon. Come to my office. I want to show you something. Is this a billionaire CEO thing? Are you going to show me your secret underground lair, millionaire, not billionaire? And yes, obviously. Every pharmaceutical executive has an underground lair. It is in the handbook. She laughed, and he realized he was already addicted to that sound. Fine. Text me the address. But if there is a cat with an eye patch, I am leaving. Noted. No eye patch cats. He texted her the details after they hung up and tried to focus on work. But his mind kept wandering to gray-green eyes and a smile that made his chest feel too small for his heart. The next afternoon, Audrey stood in the lobby of Harrington Global Solutions and tried to convince herself she had not made a mistake. The building was all glass and steel, modern and imposing, and everyone moving through the space looked like they belonged in a business magazine. She felt suddenly out of place in her slacks and simple blouse, more comfortable in a lab coat than corporate attire. Then she saw Quinn step off the elevator, and her nervousness transformed into something else entirely. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, his dark hair slightly mussed like he had been running his hands through it, and when he spotted her, his entire face lit up in a way that made her forget how to breathe properly. You made it. He crossed the lobby in long strides and stopped just close enough that she could smell his cologne, something clean and masculine that made her want to lean closer. I did, though I am starting to question my judgment. Good instinct. Questioning things is smart. He gestured toward the elevator. Come on. I want to show you the research division. They rode up to the 15th floor, and Quinn explained that Harrington Global had expanded into pharmaceutical research 5 years ago, investing millions in developing treatments for rare diseases that bigger companies ignored because they were not profitable enough. Audrey listened, impressed despite herself. Most pharmaceutical CEOs cared only about blockbuster drugs and quarterly earnings. Quinn talked about research like it mattered beyond the bottom line. Here. He led her through a set of security doors into a laboratory that rivaled the one at Northwestern. Researchers in white coats worked at stations throughout the open space, and the familiar smell of disinfectant and chemicals made Audrey relax slightly. This was her world, even if the building was his. We have been working on a treatment for Duchenne muscular dystrophy for 3 years, Quinn explained. gesturing to a young woman examining slides under a microscope. "It is orphan disease research, which means it will never make us the money we have invested, but it matters. It could help thousands of kids who have no other options." Audrey looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something shift inside her. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to understand who I am. Not just the CEO part, but why I do what I do. My mother died from a rare autoimmune disease when I was 8. There was no treatment, no cure, nothing that could save her. I inherited this company, but I chose to take it in this direction. I want you to know that." The vulnerability in his admission made Audrey's throat tight. "Quinn, I know this arrangement is strange. I know we are basically strangers. But if we are going to try to make this work, I want you to see all of it, the good parts and the complicated parts. I want to be honest with you." Audrey reached out and took his hand, the gesture feeling natural now. "Thank you for showing me this matters. You matter." His fingers tightened around hers and the moment stretched between them, loaded with unspoken things. Then one of the researchers called Quinn's name with a question, and the spell broke. But as he went to help solve whatever problem had arisen, Audrey realized she was in serious danger of falling for this man far faster than was wise or safe. They spent 2 hours in the laboratory, and Audrey found herself in deep conversation with Quinn's lead researcher about gene expression and delivery mechanisms. Quinn watched them talk with something like pride on his face, and when they finally left, he took her to his office. The view was spectacular, Chicago spreading out beneath them in a sprawl of architecture and ambition. But Audrey found herself more interested in the office itself. Books lined one wall, an eclectic mix of business texts, classic literature, and what appeared to be a complete collection of Sherlock Holmes stories. His desk was organized chaos, papers and files arranged in a system only he probably understood. And on the credenza behind his chair sat a single photo of a young woman with Quinn's eyes and his smile. "Your mother," he followed her gaze and nodded. "That was taken a month before she got sick. She was 34. I look at it every day and remember why I do this." Audrey moved closer to him, drawn by the emotion in his voice. "She would be proud of you. I hope so." He turned to face her, and suddenly they were standing very close, the air between them charged with possibility. "Audrey, I know we are supposed to be taking this slow, getting to know each other, but I need you to know something." "What?" "I have not stopped thinking about you since dinner. I know that is probably too much too soon, but I do not want to play games or pretend I am not already invested in seeing where this goes." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Quinn, you do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know where I stand." But Audrey found she did want to say something, needed to say it before she lost her nerve. "I have not stopped thinking about you either. It terrifies me, but it is true." The smile that broke across his face was brilliant, transforming him from handsome to devastating. "Yeah? Yeah." She laughed, giddy and nervous. "This is insane. We have established that." He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the touch gentle and deliberate. "But maybe insane is good. Maybe insane is exactly what we both need." He walked her to her car later, and when he opened her door, he caught her hand one more time. "Have dinner with me this weekend. Somewhere less formal. I want to take you somewhere I love." "Okay." Audrey felt like she was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying. "I will see you Saturday." She drove home in a daze, her mind replaying every moment, every touch, every look. Natalie called 3 times before Audrey finally answered, and then she had to endure 20 minutes of questions about Quinn, the date that was not quite a date, and whether she was completely out of her mind. "I might be," Audrey admitted, curled up on her couch with tea. "Nat, he is not what I expected. He is not some arrogant CEO who thinks he can buy anything. He is passionate and kind, and he actually listens when I talk about my work. And when he looks at me, I feel like I am the only person in the world. "Oh, honey," Natalie said, her voice full of affection and concern, "you are falling for him. After 2 meetings, that is ridiculous. Love is ridiculous. That is kind of the point." Audrey wanted to argue, to insist that what she felt was not love, could not be love this fast. But she remembered the warmth in Quinn's eyes when he talked about his mother, the pride on his face when he showed her his research division, the way his hand felt holding hers, and she could not quite convince herself it was anything else. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather, and Quinn picked Audrey up at noon in a car that probably cost more than her yearly salary. But when she teased him about it, he just grinned and told her to stop judging his life choices. He drove them out of the city, heading north along the lake, and refused to tell her where they were going no matter how many times she asked. "It is a surprise," he insisted. "You are a scientist. You should appreciate the experimental method, hypothesis, observation, conclusion." "My hypothesis is that you are kidnapping me." "Excellent theory. We will test it shortly." They ended up at a small town an hour north of Chicago, the kind of place that looked like it existed in a different era. Quinn parked on Main Street and led her to a diner that could have been pulled straight from a 1950s postcard. Inside, red vinyl booths lined the windows, and a jukebox played Buddy Holly in the corner. "This is where you wanted to take me." Audrey slid into a booth, charmed despite her confusion. "This is where I spent my summers as a kid." Quinn sat across from her, his long legs nearly touching hers under the small table. "My grandmother has a house here. After my mom died, she would bring me up every June and we would stay until August. This diner has the best milkshakes in the entire state, and I wanted to share that with you." The simplicity of the admission made Audrey's chest ache. "Quinn Harrington, are you a secret romantic?" "Possibly. Do not tell anyone. It will ruin my corporate reputation." They ordered burgers and milkshakes, and Quinn told her stories about summers spent swimming in the lake, catching fireflies at dusk, and learning to fish with his grandfather. Audrey shared memories of her own childhood, science camps and book clubs, and the year she accidentally set fire to her garage trying to make homemade rocket fuel. "You were a dangerous child," Quinn said, laughing. "I was a curious child. There is a difference." "Is there, though?" After lunch, Quinn drove them to a park overlooking the lake. They walked along the shore, and Audrey noticed how naturally Quinn reached for her hand, how right it felt to have his fingers laced through hers. The afternoon sun turned the water gold, and the world felt suspended, like they were the only 2 people who existed. "Can I ask you something personal?" Audrey stopped walking and turned to face him. "Anything. Are you doing this because of your grandmother, or because you want to?" Quinn considered the question, and she appreciated that he did not answer immediately, that he gave it the weight it deserved. "Both at first. I said yes because of Gran, but everything after that first dinner, that is all because of you. I am here, right now, holding your hand and trying not to kiss you because I want to be. Because when I am with you, everything else fades away and all I can think about is how much I want to know you, really know you." Audrey's breath caught. "You want to kiss me?" "Since the moment I saw you walk into that restaurant." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "But I am trying to be a gentleman about it, trying to give you time and space and all the things you are supposed to give someone in a normal relationship. This is not a normal relationship." "No, it is not." She stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. "Then maybe we should stop pretending it is." Quinn made a sound low in his throat and cupped her face with his free hand, his touch reverent. "Are you sure? Kiss me, Quinn." He did. His lips met hers softly at first, tentative, giving her room to pull away. But Audrey had no intention of retreating. She pressed closer, her hands finding his chest, and the kiss deepened, becoming something fierce and sweet and absolutely inevitable. Quinn kissed like he did everything else, with complete focus and intensity, and Audrey felt herself melting into him, letting go of every logical reason this was too fast, too much. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I am completely gone for you. You know that, right?" "I know." She smiled, dizzy and delighted. "I am pretty gone for you, too." They spent the rest of the afternoon by the lake, talking and kissing and discovering each other in ways that felt both brand new and impossibly familiar. Audrey learned that Quinn had a scar on his left hand from a childhood accident, that he was afraid of heights despite living in a high-rise, and that he could quote entire scenes from The Princess Bride from memory. Quinn discovered that Audrey had a tattoo of the double helix on her ankle that she cried during sad commercials, and that when she laughed really hard, she snorted slightly, which he found unbearably endearing. By the time they drove back to Chicago, the sun was setting and Audrey's hand was firmly held in Quinn's on the center console. She felt like she had lived several lifetimes in one afternoon, and the reality of what was happening between them was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Come up," she asked when he pulled up to her building. "I make terrible coffee, but I have excellent wine." Quinn smiled and turned off the engine. "I would love terrible coffee and excellent wine." Her apartment was exactly as she had described it. Books everywhere, stacked on shelves and tables and in precarious piles on the floor. But it was also warm and lived in, full of plants and throw blankets, and the kind of comfortable chaos that spoke of a life fully inhabited. Quinn picked up a framed photo from her bookshelf, Audrey and an older man with her eyes, both of them laughing. "Your grandfather," at my doctoral defense. "He flew in from Arizona just to be there." She handed him a glass of wine. He told everyone at his retirement community that his granddaughter was a doctor now, even though I had to explain 7 times that I could not write prescriptions. "He sounds wonderful." "He is. I am terrified of losing him." Quinn set down the photo and pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "I know. I am terrified of losing Gran. But we are giving them something beautiful, Audrey. They get to see us happy. That matters." She buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, letting herself take comfort in his strength. "When did you get so wise?" "I have always been wise. You just needed time to notice." She laughed against his shirt, and they stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other. Then Quinn tilted her face up and kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and searching. Audrey melted into him, and when he finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "I should go," he said, his voice rough. "If I stay, I am not going to want to leave, and we should probably take some things slow." Audrey nodded, even though every cell in her body was screaming at her to ask him to stay. "Okay, but Quinn." "Yeah, thank you for today, for all of it." He kissed her forehead, soft and sweet. "Thank you for saying yes to this insanity." After he left, Audrey collapsed on her couch and stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything she was feeling. She had never believed in love at first sight, had always thought it was a romanticized concept with no basis in neurological reality. But what she felt for Quinn was undeniable, overwhelming and growing stronger with every moment they spent together. She picked up her phone and called her grandfather. "Audrey, sweetheart, how are you?" "I think I am falling in love with him, Grandpa. Is that crazy?" His laugh was warm and knowing. "Love is always crazy, honey, but sometimes crazy is exactly right. Tell me about him." So she did. She told him about the research division and the diner and the way Quinn looked at her like she was something precious. Her grandfather listened, and she could hear the smile in his voice when he finally spoke. "He sounds like a good man, Audrey, like someone who deserves you. I am scared." "Of course you are. But being scared means it matters, and things that matter are always worth the risk." They talked until Audrey's voice was hoarse, and when she finally hung up, she felt settled in a way she had not in weeks. This was crazy and fast and completely illogical, but it was also real and beautiful and hers. The next 2 months passed in a blur of dinners and museum visits, and long walks through the city. Quinn integrated into Audrey's life with surprising ease, showing up at her lab with coffee, meeting her friends, listening to her talk about her research with genuine interest. Audrey found herself spending weekends at Quinn's penthouse, cooking dinner together, falling asleep on his couch during movie marathons, waking up to his arms around her, and the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling. They had not slept together yet, though the tension between them grew stronger every day. Quinn seemed determined to prove this was about more than physical attraction, and Audrey appreciated it even as she lay awake at night wanting him with an intensity that scared her. "I have never felt this way about anyone," she admitted one night, curled against him on his couch. Some old noir film played on the television, but neither of them were watching. Quinn's hand traced patterns on her shoulder. "What way?" Safe and terrified at the same time. "Like I could tell you anything and you would not run, but also like you could destroy me if you wanted to." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I would never want to destroy you, Audrey. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. We have known each other for 2 months. "I know. Crazy, right?" He shifted so he could look at her, his dark eyes serious. "But I have never been more sure of anything. You are it for me. I did not plan on falling in love, but here we are." Audrey's breath caught. "You love me. I am completely, irrevocably in love with you. Have been since you made fun of my underground lair." She laughed, but it came out watery because her eyes were filling with tears. "I love you too. So much it terrifies me." Quinn kissed her then, deep and claiming, and Audrey felt something lock into place inside her chest. This was real. This was happening, and for the first time in her life, she stopped trying to analyze it and just let herself feel. "Take me to bed," she whispered against his lips. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." Quinn stood and lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to his bedroom like she weighed nothing. He set her down gently and looked at her with such tenderness that Audrey felt tears prick her eyes again. "We can go slow," he said, his hands framing her face. "I do not want slow. I want you." What happened next was both passionate and tender, a discovery of skin and size and the perfect way they fit together. Quinn was attentive and generous, learning what made her gasp and shiver, and Audrey gave herself over to sensation, to the overwhelming rightness of being with him like this. When they finally came together, it felt like coming home, like every moment of her life had been leading to this. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with her head on his chest, Audrey listened to his heartbeat and tried to remember what her life had been like before him. It seemed impossibly distant, impossibly small. "What are you thinking?" Quinn asked, his fingers trailing through her hair. "That I am glad our grandparents are manipulative." His laugh rumbled through his chest. "That is a sentence I never expected to hear. I mean it. A few months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I knew exactly who I was and what I wanted. And then you happened, and suddenly everything is different, better different." Quinn turned on his side so they were face to face. "I know what you mean. I thought I was happy. Thought my work was enough. But you have shown me what I was missing. What life could be like when someone sees you, really sees you, and loves you anyway." "I do not love you anyway, Quinn. I love you because of who you are, every part of you." He kissed her softly, sweetly, and they stayed like that for hours, talking and touching and learning each other in the darkness. Audrey had never felt so cherished, so seen, so completely known. And when she finally drifted off to sleep in Quinn's arms, she dreamed of futures she had never let herself imagine. The wedding was 3 weeks away when Quinn's grandmother took a turn for the worse. He called Audrey from the hospital at 2 in the morning, his voice raw with emotion, and she did not hesitate. She threw on clothes and drove through empty streets, arriving at Northwestern Memorial to find Quinn in the waiting room, his head in his hands. "Hey." She sat beside him and took his hand. "I am here. She is asking for you." He looked up, and the devastation in his eyes broke her heart. "She wants to see you in your wedding dress. She wants to know we are really doing this." "Then let us show her." Quinn's eyes widened. "Audrey, you do not have to. I want to. Quinn, I would have married you tomorrow if you had asked. The wedding is just a formality. What we have, that is already real." He pulled her close and held her like she was his anchor. "I do not deserve you. You do. You absolutely do." The next morning, Audrey called her dress designer and explained the situation. 2 hours later, she stood in Quinn's grandmother's hospital room wearing her wedding gown, a simple silk sheath that made her feel like a princess. Quinn wore the suit he had planned for the ceremony, and his grandmother, tiny and frail in her hospital bed, smiled with such joy that Audrey's eyes filled with tears. "You are beautiful," Elizabeth Harrington whispered. "Both of you, so beautiful together." Audrey took her hand carefully, mindful of the Roman IV. "Thank you for this, for bringing us together. I knew." Elizabeth's voice was fading but fierce. "The moment I met you as a child, I knew you would be perfect for him, and I was right." Quinn stood on his grandmother's other side, his hand on Audrey's back. "You were right, Gran, about everything. Promise me," Elizabeth said, looking between them. "Promise me you will take care of each other. Promise me you will build a life full of love and laughter and babies that I would have spoiled terribly." "We promise," they said together, and it felt like vows. Elizabeth closed her eyes, that smile still on her face, and Audrey and Quinn stayed with her through the afternoon. The doctors came and went, and eventually, Audrey's grandfather arrived, frail but determined. He and Elizabeth held hands and talked in quiet voices about decades of friendship and grandchildren who had exceeded all their hopes. "We did good, Lizzie," Audrey heard her grandfather say. "We did perfect, James. Just perfect." Elizabeth Harrington died peacefully that evening, surrounded by the people who loved her. Quinn held Audrey as he wept, and she held him back, her own tears falling for a woman who had given her the greatest gift she had ever received. The funeral was huge, hundreds of people coming to pay respects to a woman who had touched countless lives. But through it all, Quinn held Audrey's hand like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. She stood beside him at the graveside, and when the service ended, they stayed long after everyone else had left. "She would have loved you even more if she had gotten to know you better," Quinn said, his voice hoarse from crying. "I loved her too, for giving me you." They went back to Quinn's penthouse and held each other in silence, taking comfort in presence and touch. Audrey knew Quinn was devastated, knew the loss of his grandmother would hurt for a long time. But she also knew he was strong, that they were strong together, and that they would get through this the way they got through everything else. 2 days after the funeral, Quinn's mother's sister, Deanna, requested a meeting. She showed up at Harrington Global with a lawyer and a stack of papers, and Quinn called Audrey in a rage. "She is contesting the will. She says Gran was not in her right mind when she set up the trust, and she wants control of the company." Audrey had met Deanna exactly once at the funeral and had immediately disliked the woman's cold eyes and calculating smile. "Can she do that?" She can try. But she is not going to win. I have my own lawyers and Gran's will is ironclad. But Audrey, this could get ugly. If you want to wait on the wedding until this is resolved, absolutely not. Audrey's voice was steel. We are getting married exactly as planned. Your grandmother wanted to see us together, and we are going to honor that. Deanna does not get to take this from us. She heard Quinn exhale, relief evident in his breathing. I love you. Have I mentioned that recently? Not in the past hour. You are slacking. I will make it up to you tonight. I am counting on it. The legal battle consumed the next 2 weeks. Deanna made accusations, claimed Elizabeth had been manipulated, suggested Quinn had unduly influenced a sick woman. It was ugly and painful, and Quinn came home exhausted every night. But Audrey was there, steady and strong, reminding him of who he was and what they were building together. The judge ruled in Quinn's favor 5 days before the wedding, declaring Elizabeth's will valid and dismissing Diana's claims with prejudice. Quinn called Audrey from the courthouse, his voice breaking with relief. It is over. She tried to destroy everything Gran built, and she lost. Come home. Let me take care of you. When he arrived, Audrey had wine and dinner ready, soft music playing, and she held him while he processed everything. They made love slowly, tenderly, reaffirming every promise they had made to each other. And when Quinn fell asleep with his head on her chest, Audrey stared at the ceiling and thanked a manipulative old woman for the greatest gift she had ever received. The wedding took place on a Saturday in late October, the kind of perfect autumn day that felt like a gift. They got married in the same church where Quinn's grandmother had married his grandfather, with stained glass windows painting rainbow patterns across the pews. Audrey walked down the aisle without anyone giving her away, because she was her own person making her own choice. And when she saw Quinn waiting for her at the altar, his eyes full of love and wonder, she knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises about partnership and respect and choosing each other every day for the rest of their lives. When the minister pronounced them married and Quinn kissed her, Audrey tasted salt and realized they were both crying, happy tears that felt like joy made liquid. The reception was at a historic mansion overlooking the lake, and they danced and laughed and celebrated with 100 people who loved them. Audrey's grandfather gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about love that defied logic and grandchildren who had exceeded every dream. Quinn's father, who Audrey had grown to love over the past months, welcomed her to the family with genuine warmth. But the best moment came late in the evening, when Quinn pulled her away from the party and led her to a balcony overlooking the water. The moon reflected off the waves, and the sounds of celebration faded to a gentle hum behind them. Happy? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind, deliriously. She leaned back against his chest. I did not know I could be this happy. Did not know it was possible to feel this complete. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Gran was right. You arranged my heart in ways I never expected. Audrey turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had become her everything. She arranged both our hearts. And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that. They kissed under the moonlight, husband and wife now, and Audrey felt the future spreading out before them like a promise. They would have challenges and arguments and hard days. But they would also have laughter and passion, and a love that had started as an arrangement and become something transcendent. Take me home, Mr. Harrington, she whispered against his lips. Anywhere you want, Mrs. Harrington. They said goodbye to their guests and left in a shower of rose petals and good wishes. The driver took them to Quinn's penthouse, which would be their home now, and Quinn carried Audrey over the threshold despite her protests. It is tradition, he insisted, setting her down gently. You are a sentimental man underneath all that corporate armor. Only for you. They made love as husband and wife for the first time, and it felt different somehow, weighted with new promises and permanent commitment. Afterward, Audrey lay with her head on Quinn's chest and tried to remember the woman she had been 4 months ago, terrified and logical and convinced love was just chemistry. That woman seemed like a stranger now. What are you thinking about? Quinn asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. About how wrong I was. About love, about what I wanted, about everything. I thought I had my whole life figured out. And now I know the best things are the ones you do not plan. The ones that surprise you and rearrange everything you thought you knew. Quinn shifted so he could look at her properly. I want everything with you, Audrey. Kids and grandkids and growing old together. I want to build a life so full of love that our grandchildren tell stories about us the way we tell stories about Gran and your grandfather. That sounds perfect. She kissed him softly. Let us start building. They honeymooned in Italy. 2 weeks of exploring Rome and Florence and the Amalfi Coast. They ate incredible food, got lost in tiny villages, made love in hotels with windows overlooking the Mediterranean. Quinn was attentive and romantic, planning surprises and adventures, and Audrey discovered she loved traveling with him, loved seeing the world through his eyes. On their last night, they sat on the balcony of their hotel in Positano, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Quinn pulled a small box from his pocket and handed it to Audrey. You already gave me a wedding ring, she said, confused. This is something else. Open it. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a double helix intertwined with a caduceus, the medical symbol. It was beautiful and meaningful, representing both their worlds coming together. Quinn, it is perfect. He fastened it around her neck, his fingers lingering on her skin. I had it made specially. I wanted you to have something that represents us. Science and medicine, research and application, your world and mine, all twisted together into something new. Audrey turned and kissed him, deep and searching. I love you. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Do not be scared, I have got you. Always. They went home to Chicago and life, but it was a life transformed. Audrey moved her essentials into Quinn's penthouse, though she kept her apartment as an office space for her research. They learned to navigate married life, the small adjustments and compromises that came with sharing space and decisions. Quinn learned to tell Audrey when he was having a bad day instead of burying himself in work. Audrey learned to let Quinn take care of her sometimes, to accept help instead of insisting she could handle everything alone. 3 months after the wedding, Audrey's grandfather's cancer went into remission. They celebrated with champagne and tears, and James Graham pulled Quinn aside for a conversation that left Quinn's eyes suspiciously bright. What did he say? Audrey asked later. That I better take care of you or he would haunt me from beyond the grave. And that he was proud to call me his grandson. He loves you. We all love you. Quinn pulled her close. I am the luckiest man alive. Work continued to demand attention from both of them. Quinn navigated the company through a major expansion into European markets while dealing with the aftermath of his aunt's legal challenge. Audrey's research into gene therapy showed promising results, and she was invited to present at international conferences. But no matter how busy they got, they made time for each other. Date nights every Friday, lazy Sunday mornings in bed, phone calls throughout the day just to hear each other's voices. We are disgustingly happy, Natalie observed one evening over dinner. It is actually kind of annoying. Audrey laughed. Sorry, not sorry. Do not apologize. I am happy for you, Audrey. You deserve this. You both do. 6 months into their marriage, Quinn surprised Audrey with a weekend trip to the small town where he had taken her on their second date. They stayed at his grandmother's house, which Quinn had inherited, and spent the days walking by the lake and the nights sitting on the porch watching fireflies. I have been thinking, Quinn said one night. Audrey curled against him on the porch swing. About what Gran said. About babies and building a family. Audrey's heart stuttered. They had talked about wanting children eventually, but she had not expected the conversation this soon. Yeah, I am not saying now. I know we are both focused on our careers, but I want you to know I am ready whenever you are. I want to have babies with you, Audrey. I want to see you pregnant with our child and build a nursery and figure out how to be parents together. She turned to look at him, seeing the vulnerability and hope in his face. I want that too. Maybe we should start trying. Not obsessively, but just see what happens. The smile that broke across Quinn's face was incandescent. Really, really, I think we would make pretty amazing parents. He kissed her thoroughly, and they went inside and made love with new intention, new possibility. And 2 months later, when Audrey stared at the positive pregnancy test in her bathroom, she felt terror and joy in equal measure. She told Quinn that night over dinner, setting the test next to his plate while her heart hammered in her chest. He looked at it, looked at her, and then he was out of his chair and lifting her, spinning her around while she laughed and told him to be careful. We are having a baby, he said, setting her down gently, his hands immediately going to her still flat stomach. Audrey, we are having a baby. We are having a baby, she confirmed, and then they were both crying and laughing and holding each other like they could fuse into one person. The pregnancy was not easy. Audrey had terrible morning sickness that lasted well into the second trimester, and she was exhausted all the time. But Quinn was incredible, patient and supportive, bringing her ginger tea at 3 in the morning and holding her hair when she was sick. He went to every doctor's appointment, asked questions, took notes, and stared at ultrasound images like they were priceless art. When they found out they were having a girl, Quinn wept openly in the doctor's office. A daughter. We are having a daughter. What do you think about the name Elizabeth? Audrey asked softly. For your grandmother. Quinn looked at her with such love she thought her heart might burst. Elizabeth Grace Harrington. It is perfect. They spent the next months preparing, turning one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery with pale yellow walls and a mural of stars. Friends threw them a baby shower, and Audrey's grandfather flew in from Arizona, his health improved enough to travel. He held Audrey's face in his weathered hands and told her how proud he was, how happy he was to see her so loved and so happy. Elizabeth Grace Harrington arrived 3 weeks early on a snowy December morning, screaming her displeasure at being evicted from her warm home. She had Quinn's dark hair and Audrey's gray-green eyes, and she was absolutely perfect. Quinn held his daughter for the first time with tears streaming down his face, and Audrey took a mental picture of that moment, knowing she would remember it forever. "Hi, baby girl," Quinn whispered. "I am your daddy, and I am going to love you forever." Audrey watched them, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. This was what their grandparents had wanted for them, this overwhelming love that transformed everything. They had arranged a marriage, but somehow, impossibly, they had arranged hearts too. Bringing Elizabeth home was terrifying and wonderful. Neither of them knew what they were doing, and the first few weeks were a blur of diapers and sleepless nights and learning to function on 2 hours of rest. But they figured it out together, taking shifts, supporting each other, marveling at the tiny human they had created. "She has your stubborn streak," Quinn observed one night at 3 in the morning as Elizabeth refused to sleep. "And your determination," Audrey countered, bouncing their fussy daughter. This is what we signed up for. I would not trade it for anything. Elizabeth brought unexpected joy into their lives. Every milestone felt momentous, every smile a gift. Quinn's father was a devoted grandfather, visiting constantly with toys and books. Audrey's grandfather FaceTimed daily, making ridiculous faces to get Elizabeth to laugh. And Natalie became the favorite aunt, spoiling her goddaughter with shameless enthusiasm. Work became secondary for both of them, though they still put in the hours. Audrey scaled back her lab time to work from home more, and Quinn delegated more at the company so he could be present for bath times and bedtime stories. They were exhausted and covered in spit up and happier than they had ever been. Who knew domesticity could be this fulfilling? Audrey mused one Sunday morning. She was feeding Elizabeth while Quinn made pancakes, and the scene was so ordinary and so perfect that she wanted to frame it. People who had arranged marriages, apparently, Quinn said, flipping a pancake expertly. Our grandparents were smarter than we gave them credit for. They really were. When Elizabeth was 6 months old, they took her to visit Quinn's grandmother's grave. It was a beautiful spring day, the cemetery full of blooming flowers, and they sat on the grass with Elizabeth between them, telling her about the great-grandmother she would never meet, but who had given her parents to each other. "Thank you, Gran," Quinn said softly, his hand finding Audrey's. "Thank you for being stubborn and manipulative and absolutely right." Audrey squeezed his hand, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for arranging our hearts when we did not even know they needed arranging." Elizabeth gurgled happily, grabbing at the grass, and they sat there for a long time, a family built on arrangement and transformed into something far more powerful. Love that had started as obligation and become something transcendent, something that would echo through generations. That night, after Elizabeth was asleep, Quinn and Audrey sat on their balcony overlooking the city. 2 years had passed since they first met at Marcello's, and the world had changed completely. They were married parents, building a life neither of them could have imagined. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we had said no?" Audrey asked, leaning against Quinn's shoulder. "Sometimes. But then I look at you, at Elizabeth, at this life we have built, and I cannot imagine any other path. Me neither. I was so convinced I had everything figured out. I thought I knew what I wanted." Quinn turned her face to his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "And now I know the best things are the ones you do not plan, the ones that surprise you and change everything. Our grandparents arranged a marriage, but what we have, this is all us. We chose this every day. Every single day," Quinn confirmed, kissing her softly. "I will choose you every day for the rest of my life, Audrey Harrington, and I will choose you, Quinn Harrington, always." They sat under the stars, two people who had started as strangers bound by obligation and became partners bound by love. The arrangement had brought them together, but they had done the rest, building a foundation of trust and respect and absolute devotion. And as the city lights twinkled below them and their daughter slept peacefully inside, they knew their grandparents had given them the greatest gift imaginable. Not just each other, but the understanding that sometimes the best things in life are the ones we do not see coming. The ones that rearrange our hearts when we least expect it and most need it. The arranged marriage had become a love story for the ages, and it was only just beginning. Years later, when Elizabeth was 5 and her baby brother James was 2, Audrey would stand in their kitchen watching Quinn make pancakes while their children argued over who got which plate, and she would remember that scared woman who walked into a restaurant to meet a stranger. She would remember thinking it was insane, illogical, impossible. And she would smile, because sometimes impossible is just another word for inevitable. Their grandparents had known what they were doing after all, arranging a marriage that became a love story, hearts that found each other through obligation and stayed through choice. Quinn would catch her staring and raise an eyebrow, and she would mouth, "I love you," across the chaos of their beautiful, messy, perfectly arranged life. And he would mouth it back, the man who had been a stranger and became her everything, the CEO whose family arranged his marriage and never expected the arrangement would arrange his heart so completely. But it had. It absolutely had. And they would spend the rest of their lives being grateful for manipulative grandparents, impossible timing, and the kind of love that defied logic and rewrote every rule. The kind of love that started with an arrangement and became something eternal. The end of their story was really just the beginning, a foundation built on arranged hearts that chose each other every single day, in every single way, forever and always. Just as two stubborn, loving, impossibly wise grandparents had planned all along.